So may this awareness, this historical awareness that we are going to gain through this session, may it help us to reflect deeply on the way forward on this Independence Day and see how best we can, reclaim the heritage that has been lost in the last few hundred years. So this, Macaulay, to give you a quick profile of the man and why he is important. So he was a very influential personality of his time. Apart from this Macaulay's Minute, many of us perhaps have not, looked at his background. He was a British historian. He was mainly known for his multi-volume work on the history of England, which was published in several volumes between 1848 and 1861. 1859, he passed away. Two volumes of History of England was published after his death. So he was a writer, essayist, poet, mainly known for this History of England, which became the most widely read historical work during his time of the history of England. So he was a best-selling kind of an author writer, and he was instrumental in shaping, Britain's education policy in India, and particularly for promoting the English language in preference to the native languages. So he was the first law member of the Supreme Council of India between 1834 to 37. Macaulay authored this important, influential 1835 Minute on Indian education, which we will deep dive into, advocating that government funds be committed entirely to education in English and Western knowledge, dismissing traditional Indian scholarship and texts. For Indian knowledge systems, Macaulay's legacy is particularly debated because while he extended access to Western education, his policies also are critiqued for sidelining classical Indian languages, and particularly Sanskrit, Arabic, as we shall see, and knowledge traditions in favor of English and European models. So as we go into this 1835 Minute, see, often just one of his passages is taken in, which has been quoted ad nauseum, repeated, which we will see, right, where he says that we need to create a class of interpreters and all that. But there are other, the entire minute you should read. I am presenting to you the gist of 1835 Minute today, but as a homework, please do read, because only when you read Macaulay's 1835 Minute, you get to understand the psychology of the person. So do it with an open mind, right? Leave aside the prejudices that you've heard about Macaulay being a cunning, evil person and all that. See, all these imputing motives to him is not necessary. We have to take him at his face value. We have to just see what he's saying in this 1835 Minute and what is going on in his mind, right? The psychology of the person we should try to understand. And I would also say, as we are reading these extracts from the Macaulay's Minute, think about what would happen if today any British, say, writer, historian, or a politician, or an American writer, or a historian, or a politician would say the kind of things that Macaulay is saying in his 1835 Minute. So by today's definitions of human rights, racism, etc., if you look at Macaulay's thing, this is just at the back of your mind, right? See how it would contrast, or see how Macaulay would be perceived today. So with this brief introduction, let's look at some of the important highlights of Macaulay's 1835 Minute on Indian education. So what was happening was, there was a debate between the British Orientalists and British officers on whether the official funding which was being given to these gurukulams, pathshalas, especially where the medium of instruction was the native language, Sanskrit, Arabic, etc., is to be continued or not. So it is because of this widespread debate that Macaulay intervenes with this 1835 Minute, which was then tabled in the British Parliament, and it influenced the way Britain implemented his ideas and suggestions in India. Right? So he says in this extract, all parties seem to be agreed on one point, that the dialects commonly spoken among the natives of this part of India contain neither literary nor scientific information, and are moreover so poor and rude that until they are enriched from some other quarter, it will not be easy to translate any valuable work into them. Right? So what is he saying? He's saying basically that all Indian dialects, languages, have absolutely no literary value in them, no literary content worth the name in them. They have no scientific information worth studying or worth disseminating or worth preserving in them. And these languages are very crude. They have no proper grammar. They are unrefined. They are very poor. And therefore, unless they are enriched by a foreign language, even it is very difficult to translate any of these works into any modern language. This is what he is saying. It seems to be admitted on all sides. I leave all the value judgments to later. Okay, we'll just, as I said, we'll just take him at his face value, read what he's saying. Okay, and then at the end, we will do a critical analysis of what he's saying. It seems to be admitted on all sides that the intellectual improvement of those classes of the people who have the means of pursuing higher studies can at present be affected only by means of some language not vernacular amongst them. So vernacular refers to all Indian dialects and languages. So if you please go look up the dictionary in Google, the meaning of the word vernacular, so you'll be told that any language which is primitive, unrefined, which does not have say literary heritage or refined grammar is usually classified as a vernacular. So can you classify Sanskrit as a vernacular? Can you classify Tamil as a vernacular? Can you classify Telugu, Kannada, or any of the Indian languages as vernacular? So this is a question that I want you to think about. What then shall that language be? One half of the committee maintained that it should be English. So the committee was divided over this. The other half strongly recommend the Arabic and Sanskrit. So even amongst them, you see, there was a dispute. There was a vertical split amongst them. He himself is admitting that half of them were pushing for retaining the funding and the support for the native languages and the native schools. The other half were not in favor of it. So the whole question seems to me to be which language is the best worth knowing. So in this vertical split, so Macaulay kind of tilted the whole debate in favor of basically English and English education, using his influence and using his arguments, etc. And so therefore the whole debate kind of was settled. That the English medium schools would be supported, and the funding or the support for these native schools would be withdrawn. I have no knowledge of either Sanskrit or Arabic. So look at the very frank confession that our man is making. He says, I have no knowledge of either Sanskrit or Arabic, but I have done what I could to form a correct estimate of their value. I have read translations of the most celebrated Arabic and Sanskrit works. So he has read some translations, English translations of these works. And he says, I have conversed both here and at home with men distinguished by their proficiency in the Eastern tongues. So he says he has met with scholars who are proficient in these native Indian languages. I am quite ready to take the Oriental learning at the valuation of the Orientalists themselves. So he's claiming that most of the scholars, Oriental scholars that he has met, those who have learned these native languages, so it could be British Orientalists, or it could also be the native Indians, who have studied these texts. He says, I have never found one among them who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. So basically, he's saying that if you put the entire literature of India and Arabia and Sanskrit, Arabic together on one side, and one shelf of English literature on the other, the European library on the other, the European library, the single shelf of the European library will far outweigh in value, in content, in its richness, right, in its knowledge and everything, this entire literature of India and Arabia. Then he says the intrinsic superiority of the Western literature is indeed fully admitted by those members of the committee who support the Oriental plan of education. So he's saying even these so-called British Orientalists or the Indophiles, on this point, they are very much agreed that this whole of Indian literature is useless and it has no value. And I certainly never met with any Orientalist who ventured to maintain that Arabic and Sanskrit poetry could be compared to that of great European nations. So without knowing Sanskrit or Arabic, he is saying that Sanskrit and Arabic poetry cannot compare to poetry of any great European nation. But when we pass from works, poor Kalidasa, I have great, I feel so sad when I read this and thinking of the great Sanskrit poets like Kalidasa, if they would read, if they were alive today, and if they would read what Macaulay was saying, they would turn, they would be turning in there wherever they are in the Swarga that they are. But when we pass from works of imagination to works in which facts are recorded and general principles investigated, the superiority of the Europeans becomes absolutely immeasurable. So see the sense of superiority that Macaulay has. Says absolutely immeasurable. It is, I believe, no exaggeration to say that all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at preparatory schools in England. So he says, the most paltry texts used in a primary school in England will be far better in terms of their scientific value, etc., compared to all the books written in the Sanskrit language. In every branch of physical or moral philosophy, the relative position of the two nations is nearly the same. So he says any branch of philosophy, science, etc., you consider, this comparison will hold. This judgment that he is making, this value judgment of Sanskrit and Arabic literature that he is making will hold. Then he says, it may safely be said that the literature now extant in that language is of far greater value than all the literature which 300 years ago was extant in all the languages of the world together. So you're saying in English, the literature that we have produced now is, in terms of its scientific literary value, far greater than it was 300 years ago. So he's talking of the progress that England and Europe has made in terms of their cultural movements like the Renaissance, Enlightenment, and all that. And therefore, that the literature that they have produced in the last 300 years is like extraordinarily heavy, in terms of its weightage. Whether we look at the intrinsic value of our literature or at the particular situation of this country, we shall see the strongest reason to think that of all foreign tongues, the English tongue is that which would be the most useful to our native subjects. So he says, even amongst all the European languages, amongst all the foreign languages, English would be the most suited and useful to the Indians. The languages of Western Europe, civilized Russia. So this is his claim that European languages brought civilization to Russia. I cannot doubt that they will do for the Hindu what they have done for the Tartar. So he says the Hindus will be civilized. They will become civilized if they learn English, if they get educated in English. So we are uncivilized people, according to Macaulay, and therefore we have to be civilized by English education, Western education. So this is also what other authors like Rudyard Kipling would call the white man's burden of civilizing the natives. Then he says, I have been told that it is merely from want of local experience that I am surprised at this phenomena, and that it is not the fashion for students in India to study at their own churches. So this is again a misunderstanding which he is saying. What is he saying? See, there was a system in India of what was called Bhiksha, that the brahmacharis who would go and join Gurukulams or these village schools, as I told yesterday, they they would not pay for their own education, right? Sometimes society would support their education through gifts, and sometimes they would even be given stipends to get educated, right? They would incentivize this learning was incentivized by giving stipends. So he's using this either because of a misunderstanding or I don't know. He's saying that how can this be that the students are not paying for their own education and they have to be incentivized to study, which means that study is useless, that education is useless, that literature is useless, that knowledge is useless. If the students are not interested, they are not seeking it by paying money to it, if there is no value, market value to it, and you have to pay them a stipend to encourage them to study it, why should we do this? Why should we subsidize this? This is the question that he is asking. He says, this only confirms my opinion. Nothing is more certain than that it can never in any part of the world be necessary to pay men for doing what they think pleasant and profitable. India is no exception to this rule. The people of India do not require to be paid for eating rice and when they're hungry, or for wearing woolen cloth in the cold season. So he says, you don't pay people for eating food when they're hungry or for wearing woolen clothes when they're in the cold season. So why should we subsidize the Sanskrit and Arabic education in India? Why then is it necessary to pay people to learn Sanskrit and Arabic? Evidently, because it is universally felt that Sanskrit and Arabic are languages, the knowledge of which does not compensate for the trouble of acquiring them. So he's saying those people who are getting educated in Sanskrit and Arabic, it does not compensate them. It does not get any job. They don't get any jobs. They cannot use it in any useful way. They cannot use it in any practical way. They cannot earn their bread and butter through it. They cannot make a living out of it. And therefore, it is a waste. And therefore, they have to be paid to learn it. This is his argument. And we will see why it is an incorrect argument, why it is a misunderstanding. On all such subjects, the state of the market is the decisive test. So he is saying that the market is the deciding factor in this. So market competition should decide what is valuable and what is not, right? So these are, after all, it is the East India Company. These are merchants. These are cutthroat businessmen who are doing this. And therefore, for them, the profitability is always important. Is it profitable or not? Does it have a market value or not? So education should also have a market value. It is not education for its own sake. Only that education which can fetch you a salary, only that education which can live up to this test of the market value is valuable. Otherwise, it should be thrown out of the window. And we can see that this is in fact what education has become today, right? We will teach only that which the industry demands, right? And we are glorifying this. We are saying that history is useless. We need most of the history departments in most of the colleges have shut down because we say there is no market value to it. What do you gain by reading history? It does not add any value. And therefore, what is the point of gaining knowledge for its own sake? So artificial intelligence is the only thing that we should study today. Computer science, coding is the only thing that we should study today because that is what will fetch value. This is what brings money. So this is exactly, Macaulay's argument. They have wasted the best years of life in learning what procures for them neither bread nor respect. So he says, what is the point of reading the Sanskrit and Arabic? It neither gives them bread nor does it bring them respect. So on both counts, again, we will see whether he is right or wrong. What we spend on the Arabic and Sanskrit colleges is not merely a dead loss to the cause of truth, right? He says this is not just a dead loss. It is bounty money paid to raise up champions of error. He's saying not only this is a loss, you are in fact paying to encourage a literature, a religion, a heritage, a civilization, a culture, which is a champion of errors, right? It is completely erroneous, useless, and you are paying, subsidizing it to encourage this kind of nonsense. This is his argument. It goes to form a nest not merely of helpless place hunters, but of bigots prompted alike by passion and by interest to raise a cry against every useful scheme of education. So he says this Sanskrit and Arabic schools are raising bigots who are always opposing the modern education that we are trying to bring to them. And the committee have thought fit to lay out above ₹1,00,000 in printing Arabic and Sanskrit books. Those books find no purchasers. So he says nobody is buying Arabic or Sanskrit books today. It is very rarely that a single copy is disposed of. So this is his claim. I'm not very sure how to verify this claim, but this is what he claims. About ₹20,000 a year are spent in adding fresh masses of waste paper, right? So he's saying the entire literature in Sanskrit and Arabic is waste paper. And we are subsidizing this production of waste paper by spending ₹20,000 a year by subsidizing the printing of these Sanskrit and Arabic books. We are only adding to the hoard of waste paper, which one should think is already sufficiently ample. He says already there is too much of this trash. Why are we subsidizing to print more trash? During the last 3 years, about ₹60,000 have been expended in this manner. The sale of Arabic and Sanskrit books during those 3 years has not yielded quite ₹1,000. So he says, by printing those, you have not got back even ₹1,000 of the ₹60,000 that you have spent on printing it. In the meantime, the School Book Society is selling 7,000 or 8,000 English volumes every year and not only pays the expenses of printing, but realizes a profit of 20% on its outlay. So he's saying the English literature which we are printing is bringing so much of profit. The Sanskrit and Arabic doesn't bring any profit. Why should we subsidize? Then he says it is said that the Sanskrit and Arabic are the languages in which the sacred books of 100 million of people are written, and that they are on that account entitled to peculiar encouragement. So he's taking up this argument of the British Orientalists that these are the native languages in which the sacred books of the Hindus and the Muslims are written. All the Puranas, the Vedas, and Itihasas, and the Dharmashastras, the Quran, and all these are written in that. And therefore, that the natives should be encouraged to read this. And to that, he is giving a counter argument. Assuredly, it is the duty of the British government in India to be not only tolerant but neutral on all religious questions. So he says, why should the British government take a side when it comes to religious education and promote the teaching of either Hindu religion or Islamic religion? When we don't we are told that we should not be encouraging Christian conversions of Hindus and Muslims, and that the government should not be spending on doing this, that it should not be seen to be partisan, then why then are we encouraging the study of Sanskrit and Arabic, which are, the sacred books of the Hindus and the Muslims? So he says, but to encourage the study of a literature admitted to be of small intrinsic value, it has only very little value, only because that literature inculcated the most serious errors on the most important subjects. So he says it is full of errors on the most all subjects, is of course hardly reconcilable with reason. He says it's completely irrational, illogical, the entire literature. It goes against modern science and reason. So this is his argument. With morality, it is against morals, he says, this entire literature, and there is no morality in it, there is no value in it, or even with that very neutrality which ought, as we all agree, to be sacredly preserved. And he says, as British officials governing over India, we need to be neutral to all religions. Why are we taking sides? It is confessed that the language is barren of useful knowledge. You are all accepting that Sanskrit is Arabic are useless. They're barren of useful knowledge. We are to teach it because it is fruitful of monstrous superstitions. So you're saying the Hindu and the Islamic religions are full of monstrous superstitions, and the Christian religion is not. And therefore, why are we taking sides with them? We have to teach false history, false astronomy, false medicine, because we find them in company with a false religion. He says Hindu astronomy or the Indian astronomy, Indian history, Indian medicine is all false, and it encourages this false religion called Hinduism. We abstain, and I trust shall always abstain from giving any public encouragement to those who are engaged in the work of converting the natives to Christianity. So he says, I will always abstain. I am not in favor of supporting evangelical Christian missionaries who are trying to convert the natives to Christianity. That is not my point, he says, and therefore we need to remain neutral. But while we act thus, can we reasonably, and using that argument to say, can we reasonably or decently bribe men out of the revenues of the state to waste their youth in learning how they are to purify themselves? So he's saying we are subsidizing the education of these Hindus and Muslims and encouraging worst superstitions, because then they purify themselves after touching an ass, a donkey, or what texts of the Vedas they are to repeat to expiate the crime of killing a goat. So if somebody kills a goat, then what is the prayaschitta to be done? All this kind of nonsense is there. Why are we encouraging all this nonsense? So this is his argument. So to sum up what I have said, this is the most important part, right? The summary of what he is saying of the 1835 minute. Okay, he says, I think it clear that we are not fettered by the Act of Parliament of 1813, that we are not fettered by any pledge expressed or implied, that we are free to employ our funds as we choose, that we ought to employ them in teaching what is best worth knowing, that English is better worth knowing than Sanskrit or Arabic, that the natives are desirous to be taught English. That is, he's concluding that English education is better than Sanskrit and Arabic, that even the natives, the Indians, seem to prefer this English education compared to Sanskrit or Arabic, and we are not desirous to be taught Sanskrit or Arabic, that neither as the languages of law nor as the languages of religion have the Sanskrit and Arabic any peculiar claim to our encouragement, that it is possible to make natives of this country thoroughly good English scholars, and that to this end our efforts ought to be directed. So he says all our effort should be to make the natives of India thoroughly good English scholars, and our effort should be directed towards this end. In one point, I fully agree with the gentlemen whose general views I am opposed. I feel with them that it is impossible for us with our limited means to attempt to educate the body of the people. So now he is raising a very important question, that the British Orientalists, the argument that they are giving is that you are only a handful of Britishers. So even at the peak of British rule in India, see how many Britishers were there in India? Maybe 50,000 max at any time, right? A few thousand were there. So we are a few thousand people, and we are ruling over a population of nearly 33 crores, right? Crores of people we are ruling over. So how the British Orientalists were saying, how are you going to do this? You don't have the means to educate everybody in English. You don't have that kind of infrastructure or the English teachers to do this, who can come and teach all these masses in English. And therefore, he's proposing a solution for it. So a very ingenious solution, which is not so ingenious in this sense that it was universally practiced wherever colonization has happened. The same technique has been used, as we shall see. He says, we must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us. So this is that most famous paragraph of Macaulay's Minute, which is often cited. I've got bored of reading and listening to this, but nevertheless, it is still important because it is the crux of 1835 Minute of Macaulay's education. So he says, we have to form a class of interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern, a class of persons Indian in blood, sorry, there's some typo there, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. So he says, the purpose of this education system should be that we train one class of people, we select whom we are going to train. That class of people should become Indians only in blood and color, but they should become Englishmen, thoroughly English scholars in taste, opinions, morals, and intellect. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country. And this, trained interpreters, this trained group of class of interpreters will then go and unleash this education, English education, on the masses, and they will go and refine these Indian dialects, etc. To that class, we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from Western nomenclature, because there is no science in Sanskrit and Arabic. So therefore, this science has to be introduced into these languages, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of population. So this is Macaulay's myth. But I would strike at the root of the bad system, which has hitherto been fostered by us. I would at once stop the printing of Arabic and Sanskrit books. So here comes the practical recommendations, the decisions, right? The follow-up or the actions to be done based, if you agree with what Macaulay is saying, these are the actions to be taken. At once stop printing of these Arabic Sanskrit books. Abolish the madrasa and the Sanskrit college at Calcutta. Benares is the great seat of Brahminical learning, Delhi of Arabic learning. Just retain these two places. If you retain the Sanskrit college at Benares, the Mohammedan college at Delhi, we do enough and much more than enough, in my opinion, for the Eastern languages, except for these two, the Benares Sanskrit school and the Delhi Muslim Arabic school. Shut the rest of all these schools which are there. Withdraw the support which you have been giving to them. We do enough, much more than enough, in my opinion, for the Eastern languages. There's more than enough. If the Banaras and Delhi colleges should be retained, I would recommend that no stipend should be given to students who hereafter study there. So even in the Banaras Sanskrit College and the Delhi Arabic College, don't stop giving stipends to students to study these languages. But that the people shall be left to make their own choice. Let the students decide. If there is no stipend, then let them choose based on market value what is beneficial for them, and let them study that between the rival systems of education without being bribed by us to learn what they have no desire to know. I believe that the present system tends not to accelerate the progress of truth, but to delay the natural death of expiring era. So he's saying these are Arabic and Sanskrit who die a natural death. We are only just delaying their death by giving such subsidies to them. These, otherwise they would have died by now. I conceive that we have at present no right to the respectable name of being a board of public instruction. We are a board for wasting public money. And he says by supporting this Arabic and Sanskrit education, we are wasting public money for printing books which are of less value than the paper on which they are printed. So he says the paper on which these are printed has more value than what is printed on it. So useless all this literature is, while it was blank, for giving artificial encouragement to absurd history, absurd metaphysics, absurd physics, absurd theology, for raising up a breed of scholars who find their scholarship an encumbrance and blemish, who live on the public while they are receiving their education, and whose education is so utterly useless to them that when they have received it, they must either starve or live on the public all the rest of their lives. So this is the kind of education that we are supporting: absurd education, absurd physics, absurd everything. And even if they get educated, they won't get a job, they will just starve, or they'll be parasites in society, dependent on others. So this is, my dear friends, Macaulay's education. This is the psychology of Macaulay. As I said, I've just read it out for you. As I said, I'm not doing a value judgment over it. You're all intelligent people. So you please do your analysis of Macaulay's minute, understand what he is saying, what was his attitude towards India, towards Indians, towards Indian society, towards Indian languages. What does it reflect? As I said, from today's standards of racism and human rights, if somebody would say such things today about India, how would we treat them, right? Why is it then that in 1835, when Macaulay made such shocking statements in an official document which was presented to the British Parliament, what was the Indian leadership doing? Why is it that they did not rise up in protest against this? Why did we not say boycott these English schools that Macaulay was starting? And if we had simply refused, especially the elites in India, whom he was targeting. And who were these elites? We will see through what is called the downward filtration method. So these so-called Indian elites, unfortunately, became our betrayers, became the class of interpreters. These were the brown sahibs. If they had boycotted these British schools and taken matters into their own hands, for example, in Tamil Nadu, there was a great freedom fighter called Shivasubramaniam Pillai. And when he saw that, he wanted to do Swadeshi economics to compete with the British, he started his own shipping corporation called the Swadeshi Mitra. So if he could do that in economics, if there were people, freedom fighters like him, who could take matters into their own hands, create a trading guild, that could give fierce competition to Sri Lankan ships or to British ships. Why couldn't we do this in education? Why couldn't all the Indian thinkers come together and say that we will generate funds, we will raise funds to support the native schools, even if the British withdraw funding to it, we will continue to send our children to these Indian schools. Why did we not do that, and why did we fall for this trap? Right. So this is a question that all of us should ask, especially if you are the elite classes in India today. We have to ask this question. This is an introspection that we should do. Coming to this, a very important implementation technique, tactic, or strategy which Macaulay is supposed to have implemented, which is called the downward filtration method. What was this downward filtration? Filtration means, see, he saw India as a hierarchical society where knowledge was filtrating downwards from these elites to the masses, and therefore he said we will target the top, the elite, the intellectual class. They will be the ones who will get this English education. How? By preferential allotment, by giving preference to admit them in the new schools that he was starting, in the English medium schools, in the British schools that were going to be started. These elites would get preferential admissions, and therefore they will become the fit vehicles of this English knowledge, which would then they would take to the masses. So this is what is called as downward filtration method. To put it very simply, bluntly, right? What he was doing is caste-based reservation was introduced by Macaulay in the British schools, English schools that he was starting, by preferring these segments of the upper and the middle classes, by encouraging them, by attracting them, by asking them to get educated in this English medium schools, in English and Western knowledge, believing that education would then trickle down from those elites to the broader population. If you understand this, what the implication of this? See, this is the origin of the caste hatred that we see in India today, especially the anger against the Brahmin community, the anti-Brahminical anger that you see, particularly in states like Tamil Nadu. Right? Why there is so much of anti-Brahminical feelings elsewhere is because the Brahmins fell for this trap. They became the brown sahibs, some of them. Right, many of them joined these English schools and they got admissions. And then once they got admissions in the British schools, they got educated. Then what would happen to them? They would become IPS, ICS, IAS officers, civil services. They would get into very high positions in the British administration, top clerks, top officials of the British. They would become, and therefore they would earn salaries which were extraordinary at the time. Right, they would earn something like 10,000 rupees a month, 15,000 rupees a month, 20,000 rupees a month, when the average per capita income of the poorest Indian would be something like 5 rupees to 20 rupees a month, right? So the difference would be huge. It's like a software engineer who's earning like, this guy who got a job in ChatGPT company, or in NVIDIA, who got a package of 800 crores per annum, when the average Indian is earning about, say, 40,000 rupees a month, right? That is the kind of difference it was. And therefore, within a few decades of the implementation of this downward filtration method, what happened was that the upper classes, particularly these forward castes, as we call them, like the Brahmins, etc., became very, very rich. Just give me a minute. Some relatives have come home and I'm repeatedly getting a call from them. Just sorry for the interruption. Just a minute, please.
Hello, everyone. I've been going through these uh, messages that many of you all have kind of shared, and something very interesting. Praveenji, that little hint over here, if you could tell us which letter was that, though of course I'm getting it, but yeah. So
I'm
there
sure
are,
Pramod sir will tell you. Pramod sir knows
yeah,
about it.
I kind of got the hint. But the thing is that it's interesting to kind of see these messages over here. I mean, this sharing over here. So yeah, I mean, it's nice that we all are engaged over here. Yes, sir. We can please continue. I thought in your absence we could have little
Sorry.
conversation. Please, sir. Go ahead, sir.
So I was saying that this downward filtration method, right, was the origin of all this anti-Brahminical hatred that you see in India today, particularly in states like Tamil Nadu. So this is something very important. You You may disagree with me, but you don't have to accept what I'm saying at face value. Please do your own research, right? Study this, and you will find that in pre-British India, this kind of caste animosity and hatred did not exist, right? This kind of quarreling which we see today, which has come to such a violent level, the jati conflicts and the caste conflicts that we see today, they were not, there is no literature, there is no record of that kind of conflicts being there, that kind of jealousy being there, this kind of hatred being there in the pre-British era. So this is something that for you to do a research about. So what was this downward filtration theory? Only a select number of Indians, primarily from the upper classes, were initially provided access to English-based education. Trickle-down model, the expectation was these educated elites would then impart Western learning to others, gradually spreading knowledge to the masses, hence downward filtration. Macaulay justified this approach by arguing that it was not practical or economically feasible to educate the entire population directly in English. So the rationale provided was that we don't have the funds to educate everybody in English, so we'll create this class of interpreters. I hope you're able to see the slide because I think it got switched off in between. Just please confirm if you're able to.
Yeah, it is there, sir. It's there. We can see
Okay.
this.
Okay, so I'm just sharing a legend which is often narrated about how Macaulay got this idea of downward filtration method. This is just because it's a very popular legend. It is often quoted, but please remember that this does not have any historical kind of source for it. It is just a myth that surrounds Macaulay, but nevertheless, it's an interesting myth, and I just wanted to put it in front of you with the awareness that it is a myth. So how did he get this idea of the downward filtration method? They say he was in OT, right? We are some of you are in Tamil Nadu. I'm in Coimbatore, so OT is very near. So it seems he was in OT, and remember that Macaulay was also instrumental in drafting much of what was called the Indian Penal Code, right? So he was, it seems, doing all this working there. And that he saw a high-ranking officer, an Indian officer, touching the feet of a peon in the office. And from this, he asked his own servant, what is going on? Why is that high-ranking officer touching the feet of the peon? And there he got this, he was told that the peon belongs to a very pious family of Brahmins who are very knowledgeable in Sanskrit. They're great scholars. And therefore, this high-ranking Indian officer, though in terms of his official rank, may be above that peon, he knows the background of that peon, and in respect, in deference for his traditional knowledge and the religious knowledge that the peon has, he's going and touching his feet and taking his blessings. So this is where they say that Macaulay gets the idea that it is the Brahmins that we should target in the English medium schools. They should become, they should get the preferential admission in these schools. So this is where you see that 70% of those who became these British clerks, etc., came from the Brahmin community, including the first Prime Minister. That is why Dharampalji was sarcastically referring to Nehru. If you remember yesterday's session, the overview, the second session where we did the overview of Beautiful Tree, Dharampalji was saying that those illiterate common people who were traveling on the train were more representative of India than Nehru was, because Nehru was a product of this Macaulayan system. Nehru belonged to that same Pandit community, Kashmiri Pandit community, many of whom fell for this Macaulay's trap. According to one retelling, Macaulay was surprised. So this is the legend. I will not go too much into it, right? So this is the popular legend that is told of how he got this idea of the downward filtration, right? So what was the impact of all this, right? So they created a class of narrow, a very small community of Indians, and he succeeded, right? We all know that Macaulay's downward filtration method and his 1835 minute was extremely successful. And we will see that in other societies also the same strategy was used, and they have been very, very successful everywhere in doing this. That is, the conqueror's language will be imposed on the conquered. And by doing so, right, they have controlled the minds psychologically. They have colonized us. It is not just political colonization. It is not just economic colonization. It is cultural, linguistic, and psychological colonization that is achieved through these education systems, which are created in the colonizer's language. Over time, the method's assumption that Western educated elites would disseminate knowledge proved largely ineffective, right? So what happened was his whole grand dream, grand idea and plan that these English educated upper class Brahmins would then go and turn the rest of the society into anglicized English scholars did not happen. And the curious part is that many of them turned against the British. They became freedom fighters, they became revolutionaries, they turned against the British. This is why also you will see that 70% of the freedom fighters, the freedom movement itself was again led by the same Brahmins and the upper classes who were educated in these English schools, right? Including, take many of the names, you will see that whether Balagangadhar Tilak, for example, or you look at the names of the revolutionaries, Savarkar, etc. These are all Brahmins who got educated in English and then turned against the British because somewhere their their native genius could not be killed, and therefore what it resulted was in social stratification and limited the actual reach of education. So it created this class divide. There was on the one hand these upper classes, the Brahmins, etc., and the upper classes who got educated, English educated, became very rich, very influential, and others were left behind. So it led to a lot of jealousy and conflict. And these indigenous schools, the funding was withdrawn, and therefore illiteracy increased. It did not lead to the English education of the masses. The reach of these English schools remained limited to these upper classes, and the common people had neither access to the traditional schools, the indigenous schools, nor were they able to get educated in these English schools. And therefore, Gandhi says, now please go back to the original quote of Gandhi when he said that India has become far more illiterate under British rule than it ever was before, that from being one of the most literate countries, we have become most illiterate under British rule. This was the basis for Gandhi's statement, right? So between 1835 to when this was implemented, if you look at some of the writings of all the English educated individuals themselves, Vivekananda's famous quote, for example, where he says, a child is taken to school, the first thing he learns that his father is a liar, that his father is a fool, that his grandfather is a lunatic, that all his teachers are hypocrites and all his sacred books are lies. 50 years of this English education has not produced a single original man in the three presidencies. This was Vivekananda's damning indictment of Macaulay's new education, English education that was introduced to India. Aurobindo Ghosh, another freedom fighter, great revolutionary, spiritual leader, said that English education is like a mercenary education. It is a glorified ant heap, beehive, in which we are all like the worker ants, the working colony of bees, and we will serve the queen who is sitting in England. So this was Sri Aurobindo's estimate of the, very accurate estimate of the English education system. Gandhiji himself, said that this new education that Macaulay has introduced is a de-Indianizing system of education. That is the term that Gandhi used, and he said that any Indian who goes through this system becomes de-Indianized, which is what Macaulay wanted, right? He wanted all of us to become thoroughbred English scholars. And Ananda Kumaraswamy's very famous quote, he says that this system has been inflicted upon us in the name of doing service to us. He says the greatest damage that British rule has done to India is not just this economic exploitation, but in the name of bringing modernity, in the name of bringing science, in the name of bringing modern education to us, they have inflicted upon us one of the greatest damages through this system of education. So if you look at it, gradually the Indian intellectuals woke up and started protesting, but by then the damage had been done and it could not be reversed for various reasons, because these entire social dynamics had changed. The economy of the country had changed. We were in a very bad shape, right? Those financial buffer zones, those systems, the agricultural and other revenue sources which were supporting the traditional schools had been destroyed systematically by the British. So on the one hand, they were destroying the sources of revenue which supported these schools. On the other hand, they had withdrawn funding to these, official funding to these schools. So in every possible way, you see, we were put in a kind of a volcano, in a tornado of dynamics, which led to a very speedy, rapid decline of literacy and education in India. So there's a very beautiful book written by this African scholar, decolonization scholar called Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right? So his name is difficult to pronounce, but he changed, he was given an English name, I think, called Moses, and he protests against it. And changes his name back to his native African name. And this chapter from this book was published in the Guardian recently. I had shared it with Nijiji, and she told me that she had posted in the group. I don't know how many of you read it. Please do read that entire article. But I would like to, because this is the best kind of analysis of Macaulay's plate that we can get. Every word of this essay on decolonization is like a bombshell. So this is one thing that we should please read. Please do read the entire essay. I'm presenting some important points from his analysis, because it also shows, as I was saying, that the same technique was used in Africa, the same technique was used in Latin America, the same technique was used in Ireland to to psychologically colonize the colonized population. So he says, the poet Edmund Spenser, author of The Fairy Queen, in his pamphlet, A View of the Present State of Ireland. So this is a British guy who was, who's looking over administrator in Ireland, published in 1596, argued that language and naming systems were the best means of bringing about the erasure of Irish memory. So they wanted to erase Irish history and memory to take control of Ireland. We know that Britain has had a long conflict with Ireland. It hath ever been the use of the conqueror to despise the language of the conquered and to force him by all means to learn his. So see the language, right? He says, throughout history, this has been the technique used, that the conqueror will always dominate over the language of the conquered. His language he will impose over the conquered, and by this means, he will force him to learn the language of the colonizer or the conqueror, and therefore control him. The suppression of the languages of the dominated, the colonized people, right, the victims, and the elevation of the language of conquest, of the conqueror, and domination were integral to the education system that accompanied conquest and colonial occupation. So Ngugi wa Thiong'o is saying that wherever colonization has happened, the conqueror's language will dominate. The education system will always be in the language of the colonizer, and this is how the conquest of the colonial people happens. Spencer was clear that the colonization of the Irish language and naming system would make the Irish forget who they were, weaken their resistance, and therefore make it easier for the English to conquer and subdue them. Language conquest, unlike the military form, is cheaper and more effective. Look at this. He says you don't have to militarily conquer a population. You just have to psychologically control them through the education system by using language as the means for colonization. The conqueror has only to invest in capturing the minds of the elite, and you don't have to even do it with the entire masses. You just have to capture the minds of the elite population in the country that you want to conquer, who will then spread submission to the rest of the population. The elite become part of the linguistic army of the conqueror. So see the language, right? So it is the linguistic army of the conqueror which these elites will join and impose this colonization on our minds. And then he says, because of its centrality in the making of modern Britain, he's referring to the story in India. So he's drawing parallels of what happened in India with what happened in Ireland. India became even more than Ireland, a social laboratory whose results were later exported to other colonies in Asia and Africa. So he's saying basically Macaulay's experiment was so successful here that they implemented the same model in Africa and other parts of Asia where they went and colonized. So Thomas Babington Macaulay, as a member of the Supreme Council of India from 1834 to 1838, helped reform the colony's education system as well as drew up its penal code. Both activities have a special significance. In his famous 1835 Minutes on Indian Education, Macaulay advocated the replacement of Sanskrit and Persian with English as the language of education. I'm just reading it out fast because we have covered this in order to form a class of interpreters between us, etc. Right? So this is he's pointing out that Macaulay's minute is exactly what Macaulay did in India, is what happened in Africa. Macaulay saw this new language education as bringing about a civilized state in which the values and standards are to be the values and standards of Britain, in which everyone, whatever his origins, has an interest and a part. A century later, Macaulay's words would be repeated in colonial Kenya by the then British governor, Sir Philip Mitchell. He outlined a policy for English language dominance in African education, which he saw as a moral crusade to supplement the armed crusade against the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, a liberation army the British called the Mau Mau. So they used it against in Kenya against the freedom fighters there, against the resistance movements there, the same policy which Macaulay had used in India. So he says, kill the Indian in him and save the man. This was the motto of the British colonizers. So, you have to destroy the Indianness in him. And by doing so, you're saving him by bringing him English education. The education program followed the same colonial pattern, uproot a few from their mother tongue, which is spoken by most of their people, mold them anew in the language of conquest, unleash them on the governed masses. The goal was very clear. Imperial educational policies were meant to create colonies of the mind among the elite of the colonized. The success of these policies is undeniable, a variation of the Irish situation where even after independence, the intellectuals expressed themselves more fluently in the language of imperial conquest than in the languages from their own country, right? The irony is, please remember that on 15th August 1947, the first Prime Minister of the country, Jawaharlal Nehru, gave a speech called Tryst with Destiny. In which language? In the conqueror's language, in the colonizer's language. This is exactly what he is saying, that even after attaining independence, the elites, the intellectuals would find themselves more comfortable expressing themselves in the language of the colonizer and the conqueror. And this is the case with every post-colonial country, post-colonial situation. Even where the elite are nationalistic and assertive of their independence, they find it easier to express their outrage and hopes in the languages of imperial conquest. So even Nehru, even Tilak, even Aurobindo, even Vivekananda expressed themselves in English only, even though they were nationalists. They were forced to do so. They had no choice but to express their outrage even in the colonizer's language. In Decolonizing the Mind, in his book, he says, I have talked about, very important, look at this, okay? I have talked about the corporal punishment meted out to African children caught speaking an African language at school. Children who were then made to carry a placard around the neck proclaiming their stupidity. In some cases, the culprit was made to swallow filth, thus associating African languages with criminality, pain, and filth. This is exactly what Macaulay said. These are filthy languages. There is only filth in them. And therefore, if you speak in those languages, you're considered filthy. Right, so the African schools would punish African children if they would speak in their mother tongue, right, by making them wear these placards and parading them, shaming them in public, right? And believe me, till even today, there are English medium convent schools in India which do this. If in the school premises you speak in your native language, in your mother tongue other than English, the school will impose a fine on you. The teacher will come and scold you and say that you will not be able to learn English if you do this, and therefore don't speak in your mother tongue. So imagine child psychology who's going to an English medium school and he's told that speaking in his mother tongue, speaking in his native tongue is a crime, it is a punishment. It is something that he should be afraid of doing. It is something that he should be ashamed of doing. He should be guilty of doing this. So the memory that he is associating with his mother culture, with his mother language, is something of pain, right? So this is what he's saying, that what happens is, because of this, you associate your own mother tongue, your mother culture, with something which is painful, and therefore you feel more comfortable learning the foreigner's language, the English language. So this is the analysis from Ingu Thiongo's essay. One last bit before we close for today. See, there is a quote of Macaulay which has been circulating on the internet, on WhatsApp. And I'm sick of seeing this again and again, because I take a class on Dharampal, and then one of my students will send me this quote. They say, but Macaulay said this, right? So please take note of this fake quote. There is a very nice essay written by a Belgian Indologist called Konrad Elst on this, where he proved, he's giving evidence to show that this entire quote is a fake. So please don't ever quote this fake quote of Macaulay, where he says, this is the fake quote part, which I'm showing the paragraph in quotes. I have traveled across the length and breadth of India. I have not seen one person who is a bigot. So this is not Macaulay who's saying it. It was an Indian IAS officer, who said this. So somehow people have confused this to Macaulay's utterance in Parliament. It is not at all Macaulay's utterance in Parliament. So after attending my FDP, if any of you quote this in any of your essays and papers or any of your speeches, then I'll come after you with a stick. Sorry for the joke, but I'm sick of seeing that fake quote. See, what happens is, when we quote these kind of fake things, right, we lose credibility, right? The credibility of our scholarship goes for a toss when there is so much of material. In fact, the 1835 minute of Macaulay itself is enough evidence that we have. So please go to the original 1835 minute, quote as much as you want from it. Please don't go to Google and WhatsApp University and quote these unwanted sources. So with that, we come to an end of today's session. We can take some questions, right? I know I want to say, there is a lot that I want to say, but sometimes it is better to leave certain things unsaid, because you're all, as I said, you're all very intelligent people. You should please make your own analysis, do your own research, and study Macaulay further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful, wonderful session, of course. But there were so many things that I'm sure many of us, while we were going through the session and reading what you had put on slide, must have made our blood boil also. So a lot of interesting things in the chat box have been shared. I'm sure we can all read, but we have Inaganti ji's hand raised. I'm sure he wants to share something. Sir, please go ahead. Sir?
Namaskar,
can
Pramod sir. Namaskar,
Hanji, sir.
Pramod sir. Namaskar,
Namaste,
Pratibha madam. Am I
namaste.
audible, sir?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, happy Independence Day, sir.
Thank
Bahut
you.
shubhakamna, sir, because I should not speak in English, of course, sir. So thank you very much, sir. On Independence Day, a memorable lecture, sir. A memorable lecture on Independence Day. And sir, just I'm sharing, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And these are the education, the views of these great scholars, the Balagangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Bipan Chandra Pal, Sri Arabindo Ghosh, who is a very, very, very strong personality in this regard, and Swami Vivekananda. Their views must be inculcated into the present day pedagogy and curriculum, sir, so that in upcoming years, of course, there may be change in this the schools, whatnot, sir. And first, parents should be educated, sir. Parents should be educated, sir, because so many people feel even this day proud, and they speak in English, and so that people are losing their mother tongues, whatnot. And according to my small knowledge, according to linguistics, who has command over his mother tongue only can learn any other language, of course. A reversal phenomena after independence, thanks to our post-colonial rule, post-independent rulers, some rulers only, sir. And a last 1 minute, sir. Whereas it's very interesting, Jawaharlal Nehru's father, Motilal Nehru ji, in his 1928 constitution, actually, sir, he particularly stated that after our independence, the usage of English should be reduced. Local language and vernacular language should be given importance like that. But so many people never quote these things, are always Jail Nehru, as you rightly point, at least with Disney, whatnot, everything, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Pratibha madam, for giving an opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing with us. Yeah, do we have anybody else who would want to share something interesting? Um, you can please go ahead, or if any questions, you can please put it across either on the chat box, or you can even unmute yourself. I think, sir, I don't see, there's only sharing, and people have really kind of supported whatever you were explaining and some new information. Yes, we have Sangeeta ji. Please unmute and you may please share with us.
धन्यवाद सर I mean, I've been really curious here that we have so many contradicting, one hand that you mentioned yesterday and day before yesterday, 4 people who were actually, saying that the real status or the, what is happening in terms of education, they're in the same era almost, right? And
Right.
now here we are seeing this Macaulay is coming up with, I mean, because of he wants to have that, he has been given the job or whatever. So if this is one, right? So they're really contradicting, if you look at that. Yeah. So how do they, bring that, the things that are, coming up? Are these people not being heard, or now we are actually coming to know about these, these people, literature and all that, right? So just really curious about it. I mean, nothing.
See the early British officers who came in the East India Company that came. Remember, they had not yet taken over completely administrative or political control over India. So their attitude to Indian society, culture, knowledge, education was different. So they had more kind of objectivity in observing what was happening, and they were trying to understand. Right. So that is why you see these early British historians, Orientalists, officers. Some of them, the reports that we saw, present a more sober picture, present a more balanced picture. Sometimes present a very positive picture. But once they took over, right, colonial political control, and also because of the rapid decline in the economic situation in the country, also, so their attitudes changed towards us, right? They became more dominant, and therefore that domination or that superiority complex prevented them from doing an objective study, right? So people like Macaulay, that is why I was showing that he says that he has no knowledge of Sanskrit and Arabic. So what he should have done was, he should have spent 6 months learning Sanskrit and Arabic and read a few of the scientific literature that was there in Sanskrit, like Aryabhata's Aryabhatiyam, Bhaskara's Leelavati, Brahmagupta's Panchasiddhantika, Siddhanta Shiromani. Tons of texts of scientific literature he would have found, which were far more advanced than texts of science which existed in Europe at that time. He would have also come to know that from the zero to the numerals to the decimal place value system to everything that we know of mathematics today originated in India and traveled through Arabia to Europe. So if the Europeans were doing accounting and mathematics today, it was because of the knowledge that traveled from India to Europe. So this much he would have gained that knowledge, and then perhaps his attitude towards Sanskrit and Arabic would have been very different. But he did not have that openness to see it. He came with that dominating attitude that we had taken control of India, and therefore we are the masters now, and therefore they are the conquered, and therefore this is what prevented them possibly from making a fair estimate of the true value or knowledge of Sanskrit literature, right? So this is a possible explanation, right? This is what many of the historians also point out. So that is what kind of explains the contradiction in the end.
This is something on that. Yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead, Sangeeta ji. Please go ahead.
Yeah, no, one thing that it is again, because he has been, already the East India Company have been in fact given the directive right now by that time, and with with Macaulay and as an agent in fact in between, and and that is one of the mechanism where they could actually possibly rule the country and very quickly that can be done, right? So with no war or anything like that situation, okay. So that was one of the things, maybe that he did not have that directives or whatever, right? So at least to study and to apply his brains and to objectively think what is good, bad, and so on and so forth, right? And then hence he might be, and just, and the kind of putting the benefit of doubt kind of a thing. So might be. I'm just thinking. I'm just novice to this, but I'll have to do a deep dive literature and then find out. So,
I think we can here term Macaulay as one of the illiterate person when it came to our understanding our knowledge system.
So,
Yes,
so
yes.
this is why he thinks that we have to take him at his face value. That
Yeah, I do understand that, sir.
he genuinely believed, whatever
Yeah.
he was saying, right?
Yeah,
It is not that he's perverted or cunning or
yeah,
whatever.
we can't even blame him that way. Yeah, I get that. So yeah, whatever. So I mean, whatever happened didn't happen for good. But on a larger picture, if you see, then let's take it as the cosmos or the cosmic plan that was meant for India to happen. But I'm very glad that at least we all are talking about it. We are talking about something which we were not aware of, rather, or even if we were aware, we did not pay too much of a heed to it. But after understanding, that what our past was and now what we are, I think the corrective measures are being taken, and we must take it in the right spirit and ensure that we bring it back in a way that we kind of establish that that in-depth knowledge.
Very small correction. Okay? Sorry that I'm pointing this out, but see this argument that there was some divine plan for India that this should happen. Right? This is again defeated people's way of looking at it. Right? We think that we did something wrong. We were guilty of doing something wrong. Even Vivekananda says that, right? He says that we ill-treated the lower caste, we ill-treated women, and therefore all this happened. See, this is a defeated mindset. Defeated people will think like this. So you look at the South African scholar, this Ingigu Nyong'o. He's not thinking like that, right? He's very bold, and he's saying this is the strategy that the colonizer has always used, and we should resist it tooth and nail. We should resist it. We should not be apologetic at all in any way.
No, I was not trying to be. I was not trying to be the defeated mindset. I was just looking at the larger picture in the sense that sometimes things are not in our hands, but whatever is there in our hands, like for example, now we have taken those initiatives and we are now discussing about things, and now we are taking some corrective action. So that is unsaid. I was just looking at a larger picture, like even in our lives personally, we do want certain things, but there are times when things are not in our hands and we try to go with the flow. But whatever is there, like we always say, action is in our hands, right? So action is what we need to do. So before we end, there is one last question, I guess, over here by Subrata ji, saying that if India has so many official languages, isn't it the responsibility of the government, both state and central, that the citizens to make them versed with all the official languages, at least the basics? So what do you say, sir? We must do that. I mean, it's not a bad idea because we always believed in a multi-disciplinary and interdisciplinary.
So on the question of language is, several questions that we should take home to introspect is if colonization and conquest was achieved through language, then decolonization should also involve reclamation of Indian languages, right?
Yeah.
How do we do that? Second, 79 years after so we are celebrating the 79th Independence Day. Why is it that we have not been able to agree on an Indian language being the linked language for all, say, official communication and for medium of instruction in schools and colleges in India? Why is it that we are still having English as the medium of instruction? For example, why can't we study engineering in Tamil? Why can't we study physics in Kannada? Why can't we study chemistry in Telugu, right? Why is it that we are still, why are we, say, a rural student who gets educated up to his +2 in a Tamil medium school, and then he has to learn engineering in a university, he has to shift over to English? We are putting him at a great disadvantage when he is doing that, right? So these are the questions that NEP raises, right? So how do we do this? How do we reclaim our languages, our literature? And how do we overcome this mindset, right? This divisive mindset, which has been, look at how we are quarreling over languages. So anti-Hindi agitations in Tamil Nadu, right? Anti-Hindi agitations in Maharashtra, anti-Hindi agitations in Karnataka. So all these fellows, one simple question is, you have so much hatred for Hindi, but the colonizers' language, English, you have no hatred for it, right? So do they ever even think, right, that this is the result of the divide and rule policy of the English that we are all victims of? So these are some questions I think that we should debate as a take-home message, introspect, read, and gradually I think we are heading for some resolutions to this. We will see in tomorrow's session why, through NEP, why it is addressing, how it is addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. I think NEP is addressing this. There are many colleges and universities now, they are translating the books into the regional languages and all. So that is one step ahead and forward that we're thinking of. All right, sir. I think it's already 8:15. I mean, this topic is such that we can go on and on over here. So right from the decentralization of our Indian knowledge system to becoming very constricted and very restrained, during the British time. And now we are again trying to kind of, decentralize it. So thank you so much for that wonderful session, sir. And we are really looking forward for tomorrow's session also. I hope we have taken all the questions or anything. One last we can take. We still see one hand raised. Inandanti ji, there's one hand raised. Yes,
Madam,
sir.
myself, madam. Namaskar, thank you. Sir, only one question, sir. It is not question, sir. So on this educational policies, actually, tomorrow in the last session, would you mind suggesting any areas for research, sir?
Definitely, I'll do that.
Yes, sir, because this is a very interesting and it is to be, sir, first most important area. And because I'm a history faculty, so many people who present papers in sessions in modern history, always they speak about this caste issues, whatnot, everything, not how to decolonize our country through language, whatnot, everything, sir. That's why if systematic research is done in this linguistic arena, sir, things will be much better, sir. So would you mind suggesting anything?
NTP is to encourage you to think along, for possible, research output along this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We'll do that in tomorrow's session.
Thank you very much, sir. Once again, happy Independence Day, sir. Thank you, organizers, and thank you, Pramod, sir.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night. And sir, we look forward to see you tomorrow again, sir. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll just stop the session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.